Hello and welcome to this masterclass, the 2027 Sleeping Phoenix Masterclass. There is a lot of content that we could be diving into today, but I am intentionally holding a 60-minute maximum container because a lot of this is really significant and it's a big departure of maybe how we have received information about our history, our future before. So I'm making all the efforts to keep it very simple, but also tangible, and to really focus a little bit more on where we've been so you can really get a sense of the cross of planning having really been a real thing, and perhaps get more of an awareness around what is coming based on what we have been through. So that's my main focus for this particular masterclass. If you are watching this or joining as part of just this one experience of this particular masterclass, welcome. If you are joining as a matriarch of design within the full scope of this series of 6 masterclasses, welcome as well. This is our second in the series, and it's a pleasure to have you join me, whether live here right now or on the recording. Now, I just want to have a bit more preamble around the timing of this masterclass and how perhaps this session might unfold today. We are when you watch this, this may not be relevant, but we are in the middle of the eclipse portal between a lunar eclipse and coming into a solar eclipse. And there's a lot of interesting energies around, and I'm also an emotional authority. There's been some really interesting transits as part of this, and we also have Mercury retrograde hanging around. So I am open to whatever unfolds. I'm a third line, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully the tech is going to work, and that this masterclass will be transmitted in the way that it is appropriate for this time and this chapter. So I've got some slides prepared for all the visual folk out there, and also just to keep me directed and less distracted during this transmission, because there is a lot. And yeah, let's just get started and dive in. So I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me and we'll get the slides going. And that's interesting. Let's go there. Oh dear. Okay. I'm going to move myself just momentarily. Present. Okay. All right. Let's move my little window here. Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's dive on in. 2027, the Sleeping Phoenix, or more correctly, the cross of the Sleeping Phoenix. And I'll go into why that is. It's just very long as a title and potentially create some confusion. I love this image that I've taken from Canva to really represent this particular topic, because it really shows this kind of dystopian theme. You know, a woman, there is a lot of feminine theme coming through this transition, which we'll be going into through this series of masterclasses as part of Matriarchs by Design, but this fire as well, you know, this idea of rising of the sleeping phoenix, rising from the ashes, as we close out this cycle and enter into really a completely new era that is unlike anything that we have experienced, at least in the last 400 years, and at least like within our, you know, genetic mechanics of what we have memory of cellularly within our forms. So for the past 400 years, we have been in what we call the cross of planning. Now, where do these crosses actually come from? It's really beautiful. This is very, very ancient knowledge from the Hindu Brahmin era. It's incredible, the knowledge that they had at that time, which seemed very, very primitive. What has happened now is, through the synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology and the Rave mandala through the knowledge of human design, we can really now track these global cycles. And they all follow the preceding of the equinox. So it's actually like a retrograde trend, but that's just the mechanics of it. Essentially, because of the mandala, it sets up a cross, a longitudinal and latitudinal cross of alignment. And these are the major themes that will persist for that 400-year particular global cycle. So in February of 2027, all of what we have had for the last 400 years will be completed, will end, and a new era will dawn. This is called the cross of the sleeping phoenix. And as we sort of say, because the wheel turns, and that is the mechanics, which is going to shift a background frequency and usher in an entirely new background frequency. And I'll go into what that actually means. Okay. So in this particular masterclass, I have the intention to cover what is the cross of planning, or what was the cross of planning, because in a way, I've kind of moved on because we only have less than 3 years left. The themes of the cross of planning, the major themes of this background frequency that were determined according to the channels and gates that determined that particular cross. Then what is the cross of the sleeping phoenix? What is coming? The new background frequency and the themes associated with this cross, the role of human design in all of this, and a little preview, shall I say, into how mutation fits into it all, which is a little bit of a lead in into the next masterclass topic. Okay, cross of planning. Let's begin from where we've been, from where we are. The cross of planning began in 1615 and will be completed, as I've said, in February 2027. This was a global cycle that brought a rapid expansion of knowledge and survival through tribal support. This is a really, really key word to take away: tribal. We all have an understanding of what tribal really means. It's about close connection, more in family units. It's very primitive, and it's a really important keynote within the human design system. So it was all about the tribe. Now, there was the two channels, or the gates, that made this cross. And the major one is the 3740. And this is the channel of community. So the main themes of this channel, and this was the sort of latitudinal channel, is marriage bond, loyalty, trust, betrayal. These are kind of like the overarching themes. Gate 37, that particular positioning really is determining the way, and the way was of the family. Again, very, very tribal. It's about my inner circle, and that really primitive idea of nurturing, nourishing, defending my people. And through these 400 years, that tribe has kind of expanded. You know, we would have started with small family units, and then would expanded into communities, into cities, into regions, into countries. We started getting all of these global organizations, global charities. So that tribe mentality over the 400 years has, of course, expanded, along with a lot of other things. The way of the family, 3740 as a channel in the human design body graph, connects the ego center with the emotional center. So we've got the 37 and the 40. This interplay is the ego is saying, I'll take care of you, I'll tell you what to do, and you will receive affection or nourishment or care as a result. And if we just think of that, I mean, this is really the conditioning that babies receive from the moment they enter the world. You know, when you behave, when you are good, you are reliant on this other to keep you safe, to feed you, to nourish you. This is very, very powerful, primal survival conditioning that we all have right from the very beginning. And this has really just expanded, and it's been part of the pervasive background frequency, literally this soup that we are all existing in, that is imprinting us, our attitudes, our drives, all of it. So the other parts of this cross, the other two gates that make the complete four-pointed cross, is gate 9 and gate 16. Again, very interestingly, these are very logical and collective. So again, we have this theme of very much about knowledge, logic, using the mind, strategy, these are also quite primal, but what we've seen in 400 years is the advance of technology has moved these things into a complete explosion in the way that we live and relate. This has undoubtedly been the most technologically advancing society that we have had in our history as Homo sapiens. The changes from 1615 to today are profound, and we have never had such rapid evolution in our history. Gate 9 is all about detail and perfection. And if we just sit back and reflect on that detail, this is all information and knowledge. I mean, look at Google. We have more information flooding our awareness and our lives than ever before. The internet has been a huge advancement in this arena, and it's been driven by this cross of wanting to know everything. We need to know everything, so much so that those of us with an open head are asking questions that we don't really need to ask, because we're being driven to need to know all the details, this analysis paralysis. Again, we've got this collective mentality, this tribe mentality, this going with the pack mentality. And then interestingly, 16 really sees an explosion and a display of talent. Now it's like, what does that actually mean? We've seen these incredible, we've seen the boom of the celebrity, of like really talented people, of entrepreneurs and creatives coming out of nowhere with just this platform with which to be able to really display their talents, from sportsmen through to artists, singers, songwriters, creatives in the movie industry, business, like in all realms, there has been this capacity to really just be incredibly talented as humans and to have platforms to display that and bring that forth. So a little bit more, the themes. So if we have a think about tribal, collective, this is really about looking after society. I've got your back, you've got my back. It's like this bargain. And this is the real terminology that's very, very key to understand about the cross of planning. It is all about the bargain. So in this idea of how do we look after society, this all fed into each other. We created schools, we created hospitals, coordinated things like garbage collection, armies, centralized services, welfare. We've got all of these complex systems and structures, charities, government organizations, non-government organizations, really running the world. And so as individuals, we are just part of the machine. We benefit from the machine. And in many ways, when you really look at it, we're completely dependent on this machine. The bargain was someone said, hey, I'll look after you. You pay your taxes, you vote me in, whatever it might be, you'll be looked after. And so that's the direction that we went in. That is the bargain that we've established. We bargained to give our authority to someone, something outside of us. It's not conscious, it's the background frequency that has driven this. And it's about this idea of sort of selflessness. We've lost that individual identity, and it's more about this homogenized collective, the greater good. And we've seen some really great examples of this that I will touch on. So this era has been really, really significant for various revolutions. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, but also the Industrial Revolution, the Scientific Revolution. If you want to have a look at this in a little bit more detail, a fantastic resource to dive into is Sapiens, the book by Yuval Harari. I always get his name wrong. Yuval Noah Harari. Sapiens, very, very famous book. It's had another follow-up book as well, Homogenising. But reading that book and knowing also about all of this information with the changing of the cross and global cycles through learning about human design, to see the parallels, it's really, really quite terrifying, but also like really affirming. It's like this all kind of makes sense, and there's a logic to this, despite the fact that it seems very, very out there and mystical. So also in this era, we really saw the birth of secular science. This is really Ra's terminology. It's, where science kind of became its own belief system and something to worship. And a great example of this, now the Black Plague, this began in the 1300s, but it wasn't until we moved into the cross of planning where it was really viewed as a community issue, and we started looking at sanitation and putting these things in place from a collective perspective. And lo and behold, things like sanitation, scientific development, that all started to move. And the last outbreak of the Black Plague in London, 1665, 66, we started to resolve this because we started to move into a community collective scientific approach. So the whole world on this particular background frequency creates a huge interdependency. And Ra gives a really great example of this when he speaks about thinking of any of the large cities. You think of somewhere like New York and all of the individual humans that are inhabiting that particular place and space, and they are all going to get up in the morning and they're all going to need breakfast. How does that machine even function? They're not growing food there. There is a large proportion of people that need to be moved and fed, and they need to use the bathroom, and all of these things have to happen. And the only way that that can happen is through this collective organizational approach. So many people don't know where their electricity comes from. They just trust that it does. They don't know how their sewerage is managed. They just trust that it is. And all of these things are all part of the cross of planning. They're not bad. There's no good and bad in any of this. It's just witnessing what is, what has been, taking that perspective at this very, very final hour in this particular cross as we're really coming to the door closing, and bringing that perspective to, well, what does this mean for what's coming? Where are we going? What might that look and feel like? What's going to be the experience? So downsides and limitations of the cross of planning. Like, we all look around now and we have really the most advantage of any time in our history as Homo sapiens. We have the most comfort, the most convenience. We are literally growing fat and lazy on this. So there are some downsides, despite all of the so-called improvements in healthcare, improvements in health access. We're still living in times where there's still babies dying of starvation in the world that can't access healthcare. We're still suffering in times of massive injustices to various portions of society. We're still suffering from suppression of women, suppression of different types of people within society. So other downsides and limitations. These are all there's a bit of a background frequency situation happening out on the street. That's okay. All created through a background frequency of tribal and collective conditioning. This idea of, I'm going to look after my tribe, and it's very primitive. And we've fought wars over this. This is, we've also had some of the worst conflicts during these last 400 years. We've had the ability to create weapons and create armies, and that has completely changed the face of how we actually govern the world and how we fight with each other. It also then created organizations like the UN and the WHO. Are they still effective? It remains to be seen, and we'll be going into that a little bit more. So it's all been about organizational structures. So you can look at this from even the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly we needed all the adults to go in and start working in the factories. It's like, oh, okay, what do we do with the kids? Institutionalized education started. We created schools and homogenizing children into education so that the parents could go out and go to work and be productive. So hospitals are another great example, centralized care facilities, all of our utilities, the electricity grids, the gas pipelines, public transport, healthcare. These are all cross of planning. The downside is these systems are not supportive of the individual, rather survival and safety as a collective, conforming, homogenized group. Now, we definitely saw, maybe not all of us, a really interesting playing out of this with the COVID pandemic. Suddenly we're and we're in the final throes of the cross of planning. So this background frequency is fading. It's already moving on. So we're starting to see this individuality coming through. And that was a real battleground with the COVID pandemic, because there was this crumbling governmental, healthcare, scientific community that was trying to have the bargain with the people, give us control, we'll look after you. And you've got the individual that is going, I don't think so. That's not for me. My authority, my instinct is telling me different, and I'm not so sure. And this is a beautiful example of this shifting within the background frequency, this fading of this surrendering full trust to the tribe and starting to stand on your individuality. So external authorities that we have really surrendered to, police, government, the World Health Organization, that took on, that crumbled during COVID. You know, its level of authority and ability to orchestrate how we navigated that pandemic globally was a farce. So the World Health Organization crumbling, United Nations crumbling, NATO crumbling, colonialism is crumbling. The royal families are starting to actually fall apart. We're seeing all of this through the fading background frequency of the cross of planning. So we are at a new dawn. It is undoubtedly an incredible time to be alive. It is really a time where we're going through a massive transition. Those of us alive now will not experience all that is to come as we move forward into the new cross of the sleeping phoenix. But it's going to be very, very interesting to be witness to the actual shift and transition between these two eras and global cycles. So what we say essentially from the global cycle point of view is we are in the final nodal cycle of the cross of planning. A nodal cycle is 18.6 years. So we're at the really final stages of that. It is crumbling, it is dissolving, and there is evidence of this everywhere at every level of organizational society in all countries, everywhere. We are seeing failing institutions, marriage, organized religions. We are seeing a rise of entrepreneurship over employment, you know, that kind of employment model of I go to work for a boss. No, this is all starting to shift. We're seeing so many people stepping into their own businesses now. As I've mentioned, I don't want to slam them too much, but the World Health Organization, the UN, failing. The financial sector is very unstable. It's going through a really, really massive transition. Don't know where that is going to end up. And as I've mentioned, the royal family, like particularly within this nodal cycle, the last 18 years, you know, the British royal family is a great example. You know, we've seen Harry and Meghan completely step away and distance themselves. Like that never happened before in history. This idea of the individual, I don't want to belong to that tribe anymore. I don't align with that way of thinking and being and doing. This is the shift, and we're going to see more and more and more of it. So the sleeping phoenix, this is where we're going. It begins in February 2027, and it's going to go on for about 400 years as well. So the big shift in the theme, as I highlighted previously, tribal was cross of planning, all about the tribe. We are shifting very dramatically, very finally into individual survival. It's going to be every man or woman for themselves. It's about the individual. The two predominant energies of this particular cross is the 55-59 and the 20-34. Gate 55 is the way of the individual. It's right there. So we've gone from gate 37, the way of the family, total flip into gate 55, the way of the individual. And gate 55 is going to be undergoing a mutation. So that adds some extra interest to see how this is going to be expressed within society. The channel that we have is the 2034, and this is the channel of charisma. This is a deeply individual, or you might even say selfish tendency, and it's really the person that's just concerned with, as Ra would say, his or her own trip. They're really out for themselves. They're about themselves. You know, we can say that we're already seeing a lot of examples of this. You look at something like Instagram, where it's all about the individual and their persona online. You know, we're starting to see these things play out because we're in this, you know, final moment of the door closing. there will be an absence of social support. It will no longer be a given that someone is going to deliver food for you, that there's going to be food on the shelves, that all of those organizational systems are going to continue to be coordinated, because the background frequency that allows that, it's not us going, oh, let's coordinate all this. We are being imprinted by the background frequency. So when that imprinting shifts, our behavior and what we see as important will shift as well. Unfortunately, currently in our world now, the most disadvantaged humans on this planet are going to be the most impacted first. The ones that are in the most poverty-stricken, the most desperate areas that have become reliant on the charities, on the governmental organizations, on the NGOs to deliver food to them, to provide clean water. Once those systems that have been supporting those people are no longer available, they're going to receive the most immediate impacts. Sadly, another angle to this as well is part of the mutation that's coming through, and part of this global cycle progression is the heating up of this planet. And this is a completely different topic, and it's not about yes or no global warming is a real thing, but it is happening. And it is actually part of the mutation moving through. And sadly, again, where are the places getting the most impacted from global warming? These disadvantaged countries. So it's kind of a sadness that what we have put in place with the cross of planning, that we kind of pat ourselves on the back going, we're doing a good job because we're helping all these people and we're all in this together, it's just going to disappear and fall away. Now, not immediately, of course, not immediately, but the background frequency that is imprinting our behavior will shift. So this transition is going to happen as well. It's inevitable. And as I've mentioned here in the last line, we've got this major genetic mutation in the solar plexus that is also weaving in amongst all of this shift. So that particular topic, I'll be going into in a separate masterclass. So human design, like, how does it fit into all this? Because human design is not dictating this changing of the cross and these global cycles. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is ancient Hindu Brahmin knowledge. It's just being brought through now in a different way through the lens of human design. And human design is a body of work that Ra Uru Hu brought through from his encounter with the voice back in 1987. So human design has arrived beautifully at a moment when we need it the most. And that has really been what's been happening since the 1960s, again, based on the alignment, the cross that we're in, where planets and gates are. Since the 1960s, we've had this huge drive. This has been through gate 61, this huge drive of self-awareness, self-development, this higher questioning of what's it all about, who am I? And we've been seekers of knowledge. We've been really driving for that really since the 1960s. And you can kind of see that that has been the case. So human design has now come in and been added to all of that mix to say, hey, this is how all the mechanics of this go. And this is Ra's interpretation of how those mechanics can play out. Based on what is coming, he is focused on strategy and authority and has brought forth the human design system as a synthesis of the knowledge that he received. So this is a quote from Ra, and it really does, it's sobering to me, because human design has and frequently gets lost in the self-development space as a very surface level, fad-like self-development tool. And it is so much more than that, and that is getting missed. So Ra has said, it's why this knowledge came into the world. It's for those who are going to be born, or those children who are being correctly raised now, so that they're going to be able to live in that world and be able to deal with that world. He has always said human design is for the future generations. But we can't give it to the future generations if we're not already working with it. It has to create a legacy so that it has impact, so that it is integrated within how we raise children, how we teach them to hone in on their individuality and listen to their inner authority, their uniqueness, rather than the homogenized mass out there, because it simply won't be there anymore in the way that we have experienced it. That's why human design is here. And that's why the primary point of how Ra has taught human design is strategy and authority, because this is re-educating us as conditioned beings that are already here, how to decondition and come back into our own authority. And from there, we understand how to then teach that to our young, the next generation, so that we're giving them the best tool, no matter what happens, in what cross, in what plane of existence, they will know how to run their life that's correct for them. And that's going to look different for all of us. So a little bit more emphasis here. It's all about being your own authority. There are so many unknowns about the cross of the sleeping phoenix. You know, at the moment, it is science fiction. While we are still in the final ethers of this particular background frequency, it's very, very difficult to imagine what a different world would be like, where we don't have all this organizational structure and this tribal support system that we're not even really aware of anymore. We just take it for granted. So it's so key that we can begin to decondition this homogenized thinking, the pack mentality, and this really, really deep conditioning to tribal attachment. You know, these family bonds, these so-called, you know, the marriage bond, these commitments that may not actually be for the greatest good of the individual, because there is going to be no external authority to rely on. There's a little bit of an exception here with mental projectors. They do have a degree of their authority coming from the mind, but for the rest of us, our authority is in our body, and also reflectors have an exception of this, but their authority is coming through their form. It's through their body. It is a body phenomenon. Our authority is not what we think. It's who we are. And the problem that we have is we don't really know who we are, because we're looking outside of ourselves at all of the examples that are out there, thinking we need to look like that, we need to behave like that, because that is how we've been raised and conditioned. There is safety and conformity, and that is no longer going to be the case. So we really have an urgency now to finally answer the questions of who and what we are and why we are here. The next little piece that is really helpful in understanding this is what we're actually living through in our physical form right now, and what we moved into since 1781. So this was a separate mutation, not related to what is coming in 2027 with the solar plexus, but it was the beginning of what we have been moving through, and a process that will actually be completed in 2027. So we are essentially walking around in a borrowed vehicle. This vehicle now, we used to have 7 centers. This is the chakra system that, you know, many people know quite well. It's very popularized now through yoga. We used to be 7-centered beings. After 1781, we had a mutation that moved us into a 9-centered vehicle. Now, this 9-centered vehicle is not for us. It's a little bit of a lease, a hire or lease of a vehicle that we get to experience if we're conscious of it, if we want to really align with that idea and that possibility, which is what human design is teaching us and guiding us to do. But the main biological point of us being in this form is because this is the physical form for the next mutation, which is actually not a human mutation. It is a new species that will be carried through us, that we will birth, because they will have the form that we're currently occupying, and that's how it will be carried through to this new species. Science fiction. So this is, and again, more of a topic that we're going to be moving to within Matriarchs of Design. We're going to be having a masterclass on raves and the mutation. This is all to come. So we essentially have a form We have new hardware, but we've got an old operating system. The software is still 7 centers. And we've got this, like, you know, it's like, just say you've gone from a, you know, reliable, economical 4-cylinder Ford hatchback, and you're actually in a Ferrari. You're in something that is just completely, needs to be driven a different way, needs to be fueled a different way, has different capabilities. It's kind of like that, if I can give a car reference. Hopefully that lands with some of you. It does for me. So with the 7-centered way, we had surrendered to an outer authority and the tribal collective, because this worked under the background frequency of the bargain and of the cross of planning, which was when we were predominantly 7-centered beings. And so since 1781, we've been in this really kind of interesting transition period, Homo sapien in transitus. And so, yes, the background frequency is still there, but we've got this new mechanics to work with that we're completely unaware of. And we are so conditioned to work as a 7-centered being. And we've been in a background frequency that's persisted for the 7-centered being. So we're in this amazing portal of potential transformation that human design is here to kind of help us map out and navigate for ourselves as individuals. So what do we need to do? We simply need to step into embodiment and living as 9-centered beings with our own inner authority. You're just coming into yourself. You're your own authority. Your authority is going to be different to anybody else's, very likely. And no matter what is happening out there in the homogenized collective, you stand firm in your authority, even if it's illogical. And that can be really, really challenging. And it requires an experiment. And that's why we say human design is an experiment. It requires a cellular deconditioning process to literally deprogram and wring out the conditioning and background frequency that we have inherited. And that's why Ra has said it takes 7 years. That is his determination of this cellular deconditioning process. I don't fully align with that thinking, because mechanically, biochemically, physiologically, as a doctor, I understand that the body works a little bit differently to that. So I'm not firm on that myself, but this is as Ra had said. So he has taught, and it is the common belief out there in the human design world, that deconditioning takes 7 years, and that's due to the cellular process that needs to be gone through. So deep breath. Where are we going? Where are we going? What else is happening in this cross of the sleeping phoenix? The sleeping phoenix, in my perception of it, is the solar plexus. It is this sleeping phoenix that is going to awaken post 2027, that has been sleeping through the cross of planning, that got its beginnings, its birth was in 1781. Beautifully, this also coincides with when the projectors came into existence as well. There's no coincidences or mistakes here. All of these pieces are part of this process. There is nothing for us to change, to run away from. We just have to watch the movie, as Ra said. It's like the train is going to go off the cliff. It's not our job to stop it. We just need to get the best seat we can. That's literally what he says. And it's beautiful, because even though this all can feel very heavy and very doom and gloom and very scary and very confronting and bring up a lot of emotions at solar plexus, there is a really, really simple message behind it all. There is no choice. There is nothing that we can do to stop this. We can just choose how we show up for it. And that there's a sense of surrender, and that theme is definitely coming through this Matriarchs of Design series as well. There's a sense of surrender and the simplicity of just watch the movie, just live your life as yourself. You're going to be okay. And we just watch the movie, and what an amazing time to be alive. So the mutation in the solar plexus. This is going to be the next masterclass that you can join as an individual, or if you're in the matrix of design, this is what we're doing next. And the mutation is within the solar plexus. And the major mutations are going to be happening in gate 55, 49, 19, and particularly the 49-19 channel. I have this channel, and the main crux of this solar plexus shift is the solar plexus is a motor. The solar plexus has and does create most of the roller coaster ride that we as emotional humans experience day to day on this planet. That motor runs as a wave. That's why it's fluctuant. That's why it feels like a roller coaster. We've got the emotional authorities with their roller coaster. We've got the open solar plexus receiving the roller coaster and amplifying it. And it's a crazy dance, and it's the world that we live in. That motor function of the solar plexus is simply going to be switched off. Switched off. And that is going to allow the solar plexus to become the next awareness center. We had splenic awareness is the most primitive. The ajna was then the next one that developed, and now it's the solar plexus turn. And this awareness is for the raves. We won't really even be able to tap into it in the way that it is being prepared for them, because it's important for them. But we get to watch the movie and watch it unfold and be part of the show and live as ourself. And that's what human design is here to give us permission, is to unplug, unhook from the collective, from the homogenized world, because it is going to fall away anyway. The sooner that you can tap into your uniqueness, who you are, your mechanics, and live through those, you are going to have less resistance in life. You are going to experience a lot more beauty and simplicity, because the greatest gift and what we all truly want is freedom. And that freedom, when we really pull back the layers, it's the freedom just to be ourselves in every moment, with every breath, no matter what is going on in the world out there. And that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We come back. Thank you very much. I think we managed without any major technical glitches, and we managed to keep Mercury aside. If there is anything that's come up from this masterclass, I mean, I call it a masterclass pretty loosely. Masterclass gives the sense that, you know, you should have a really complete, thorough, deep understanding of this topic. It's really not my intention for this series. I'm really just wanting to introduce these ideas to give some depth to human design that's really lacking out there, because we think it's just a self-development system, and it's not getting the reverence that I feel it deserves, and that I feel will give people will grab your attention more than just another self-help tool, because we're just so bombarded with all of that material. This is something so much deeper, so much more profound, so much more timeless. And it really is the system of our time. Anything pre-1781 was for 7 centers. Think about that. So thank you all for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the replay. If there is anything that you would like to receive clarity on, if you are interested in having an individual session with me, then you can contact me through the DMs in Instagram, or if you're receiving this replay through your email, you can of course email me, and we go from there. So thank you very much for being here. I hope this has been of value. Ciao.